assembled in today's digital platform on the eve of WebNet on overview of valuation and emerging professional opportunities. Respected resource person on today's occasion, CMA Dr. Sunil Kumar Gupta sir, CMA Dr. Suresh Chandra Mahanti sir, President 2013-14, past Chairman of EIRC, Central Council member, Regional Council members, past Chairman of the chapter, Senior member of the chapter, professional colleagues, invitee and guest, Chairman PD Committee, CMA Shaktidhar Singh sir, Secretary of the chapter, CMA Surjan Narayan Tripathi sir, and all professional colleagues in the management committee. I, CMA Himoj Mishra, Chairman of Bhubaneswar chapter, welcome you all to today's webinar. On behalf of management committee, I convey my sincere thanks and deep gratitude to the respected resource person on the occasion, CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta sir, for accepting our invitation in spite of his recovery from illness and busy schedule. All might have aware that the said webinar was supposed to be held on last Saturday, which could not been held due to illness of Gupta sir and rescheduled to today. Thank you, Gupta sir, for your commitment.
Thank you. Thank you.
And pray before Lord Jagannath for your good health.
Thank you.
I am also very much thankful to our Chairman PD Committee, Shakti sir, to arrange the webinar in spite of his bad health since last week. Also praying Lord Jagannath for his speed recovery. Due to his illness, I would like to introduce today's resource person, Gupta sir. Before that, I would like to request the official of the chapter to play the Institute anthem as a mark of inauguration of the webinar. Thank you. Now it is the time to welcome and introduce today's resource person. Dr. S.K. Gupta is a postgraduate in commerce, gold medalist, fellow member of Company Secretary, Institute of Company Secretary of India, fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountant of India, PhD Corporate Governance with over 40 years of corporate experience in leadership position with various public and private sector organizations in the domain of finance, costing, internal audit, legal, and company secretarial function. He has dealt with merger and acquisition, corporate restructuring, anti-dumping duty, and corporate governance mechanism. Dr. Gupta sir is currently Managing Director of the Registered Valuer Organization of the Institute of Cost Accountant of India, former MD and CEO, Insolvency Professional Agency of ICMAI, Group CEO, AIHP, Director, PhD Chamber of Commerce, and Group Company Secretary, Head of Legal, Internal Audit, Finance, HR in various listed companies, and Independent Director in various listed companies. Dr. Gupta sir has chaired and addressed a large number of national and international seminars and conferences. Dr. Gupta sir has been a visiting faculty at various business school, IMT, 4, BIM Tech, IIT, ICSI, ICAI, JIMS, NMIMS, Symbiosis, and other institutions for over 30 years. He is a prolific writer and written over 200 articles and research papers in the domains of IBC, finance, management accounting, strategic cost management, valuation, corporate reporting, corporate governance, sustainability, integrated reporting, corporate restructuring, and corporate law, which are regularly published in various professional journals. He is consulting editor, Ramaiah and Company Act 2014 edition, and editor-in-chief, Truth and Youth Law Journal. He is a paper setter and examiner of various professional institutions and reviewed course material for ICMAI, ICAI, and ICSI for various papers and courses. Dr. Gupta sir is a membership and standard recognition board of IVSC Capital Market Committee of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Corporate Affairs Committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Banking and Finance Committee of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you, sir, for acceptance of our invitation and love and affection shown to our Bhubaneswar chapter.
Thank you, sir.
As today's resource person is a part and parcel of our CMA fraternity and also our Nobel Institute, he knows very well about the Bhubaneswar chapter and its activities.
Thank you.
I am not highlighting about Bhubaneswar chapter and the institute. Let's listen from him on the topic and hope this will be a very educational and interactive session for all of us. Now I request Dr. S.K. Gupta sir to deliver.
Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to all the participants. I'm extremely thankful to Honorable Past President of the Institute, Sri Dr. S.C. Mohanty, the Management Committee Chairman, Vice Chairman, other officials of Bhubaneswar chapter for giving me an opportunity, yet another opportunity of interacting with the members of the region and also sharing my perspectives on this very important emerging topic of valuation. So I'll be giving a broad overview or perspective of valuation with regard to what is the concept, what are the approaches, what is the need for valuation under various laws, and what are emerging professional opportunities in the domain of valuation. That's going to be my agenda for today evening session. Just give me a second. Let me share my presentation on the screen, please. So demystifying valuation. All of us have heard this word quite a few number of times, and all of us have different notions and different connotations as to what exactly is meant by the term valuation. So the purpose of today's talk or the purpose of today's session is to demystify the meaning, the concept, approaches, the techniques and tools of valuation, and also to provide a brief glimpse of what are the emerging opportunities in this newly emerging professional domain. That is the agenda for today's session on demystifying valuation. All of us know that the world that we live in today is changing dramatically. It has changed very, very significantly over the period of last about 2 or 3 decades, and more so particularly over the last 20-22 months of COVID-19 pandemic situation. It is no longer the same. It is kind of now a new normal that's going to be a normal henceforth, but it's an entirely changed scenario that we live in, that we work in. The world is entirely changed. It has changed on account of very many different developments which have taken place in not only the technological front, especially the information technology, with internet, IoT, blockchain, data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning becoming very, very important to everything that we do in our life and everything that we do in our organizations today. But besides that, there have also been changes taking place in the basic mindset of the people. The thinking of the people has changed over the period of last about 2 years, that the world as a whole has faced a huge crisis, a humanitarian crisis, commonly known as COVID-19 pandemic situation. Earlier, there was kind of a rat race towards competition. Everyone wanted to go ahead of the others, be it a career, be it a household, be it a family, be it whatever. But now the world has come to a halt. People are taking time to rethink their priorities in life. It is no longer rat race and competition with others. People are taking it in a different mindset altogether. Everybody says, let's live the life today. You never know what is going to happen tomorrow. That's because people have been shaken. Humanity has been shaken by the onslaught of unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic situation, which has impacted the whole humanity. It has impacted lives of the people. It has impacted livelihood of the people, and it has also impacted lives of the various firms. Many companies have been closed down since the breakdown of COVID-19 pandemic situation. And many companies are trying very, very hard to keep their head above the water and to keep afloat in these very, very turbulent times. The times are really very, very challenging and very, very trying. It's a VUCA word. It's a well-known acronym. We all know about this, where V stands for vulnerable, U stands for uncertain, C stands for complex, and A stands for ambiguous. It's a highly vulnerable, very uncertain, hugely complex, and very, very ambiguous world that we live in today. And in this current business world, we see very, very disruptive business models, the kind of models which were unheard of till about a few decades back. You look at Uber, you look at Ola, you look at Netflix, you look at Flipchart, you look at Amazon, any new startup you talk about, they are bringing about very, very disruptive business models, which were unheard of till about a few decades back or a few years back. Innovation is the call of the day. Those businesses are flourishing in the marketplace, which have been very, very innovative in terms of business idea, and they have disrupted the apple cart, and they have disrupted the business balance which was persisting in the entire world, across the world, a few years back. But when you look at the profitability position of these new age businesses, or the innovative businesses, or the disruptive businesses, we find that many of the businesses have profitless turnover. They have a good enough top line. They have a good enough robust turnover, but end of the day, there is no profit existing in the company. Or we find companies which are cashless profit making. They have a good enough bottom line. They make a good enough accounting profit, but end of the day, there is no cash or there is no liquidity. Profitless turnover, cashless profit. These are the kind of realities of these new age businesses that we follow today. But when you talk about and look at their valuations, wow, skyrocketing, very, very high. In spite of there being no profitability, in spite of there being a cash crunch or a liquidity problem, the valuations of the company today in the marketplace are going very, very high, soaring very, very high. Look at the case of Zomato. The IPO of the company hit the stock market about 3 months back. This company had a turnover of 2,600 crores. This company had a loss, currently a loss of 2,300 crores. This company had an accumulated loss of 4,600 crores. But in spite of all this, the company's IPO was oversubscribed 38 times. People who had applied for the shares of Zomato, they did not get any allotment because the share was oversubscribed 38 times. And the share was priced at 75 rupees per share at the opening price. And currently it is hovering in the range of 140, 150 in the stock market. The well-known worldwide, world-renowned guru of valuation, Mr. Ashwath Damodaran, he carried out financial analysis of this particular stock, Zomato. And according to him, the share price of Zomato stock should not have been more than 35 to 40 rupees. But then we all ended up paying 75 rupees for purchasing one particular share of this company. And right now it is floating in the market at a price band of 140 to 150.
Sir, PPT is not forwarding, sir.
Sir, I'm not moving the PPT as
Okay,
of now. I'm talking just like that.
Okay.
So the point is that in spite of the companies not having robust and very, very healthy financial position, the companies have in the marketplace today very high valuations. That is what brings about the focus into the importance of valuation. Many of the companies we know real life, a company with a balance sheet size of maybe 100 crores might be having a market capitalization of 500 crores. Quite possible. There are many companies with this kind of a profile. The reason is that balance sheet reflects just about 25%, maximum 30% of the value of any company. Rest 80%, 75% of the value of a company is drawn from intangible benefits that the company has. Goodwill of the company, branding of the company, brand equity of the company, patents, copyright, trademark. All these are very, very important in terms of the value creation ability of the company. Therefore, the point is that today, whenever we look at the corporate performance of any entity, when we look at performance of any company, we do look at the financial performance in terms of profit, profitability, and we also look at various ratios, cash ratio, current ratio, liquid ratio, working capital ratio, return on capital employed, return on net worth, economic value added. We also look at balanced scorecard, Robert Kaplan. We also look at ESG factors, environment, societal, governance factors attached with the company. What is company doing with regard to the environment? What is company doing with a view to helping the society become a better place to live in tomorrow? And what is the kind of governance structure that the company has? And that is the metrics that we talk about, commonly known as ESG, environment, societal, and governance architecture of a company. All this is becoming very important because investors of today are becoming very, very choosy. Some people have lots of money. Private equity players, venture capitalists, angel investors, they have a lot of money. But it's not that they will put the money in any business. They will carry out due diligence and then put their money in a business venture, which they think is not only doing great business, but is also doing good business. There is difference between a great company and a good company. A great company is a great, of course, in terms of size, in terms of structure, in terms of turnover, in terms of profitability. But a good company is one which may not be having a very high turnover, might not be having a very good amount of profitability, but nonetheless, The company cares for environment. The company cares for society. The company has a robust, transparent governance structure. That is what I mean by a good company. Many good companies in the marketplace today are having high valuations, higher than the great companies, because great companies might only have the financial results to show to the general public, but a good company has many other characteristics by which they are able to attract the various investors by putting their funds into that particular corporate venture. Valuation is an art or a science? Is a very old debatable question. But I think all of us would agree that valuation is both an art and a science. Because any subject which is identified as a science has certain universally applicable fundamental principles. And art is application of those principles in real life situations. So actually, valuation is both an art as well as a science, because in valuation, we have certain fundamental universal principles which are applicable in all kinds of situations. But then every time we apply those fundamental principles, they need to be adapted, they need to be changed, they need to be modified to suit the requirements of a particular valuation assignment. Valuation is an art. Valuation is also a science. And if I may use a third word, valuation is more of a craft. It's a craft. It's much more than art. It's a craft. It's a craft means that it's not only simply juggling with the financial numbers. It's not only simply looking at numbers and do some kind of data analytics and come out with a valuation figure. It's not as simple as that. Valuation involves numbers, yes, but numbers are only the starting point and not the end point of valuation. The numbers are used to weave and craft a story, a business story, a credible business story, which people believe, and thus they believe in the destiny of the company, and thus they want to invest in that company because they find the company to be a strong company, robust company from various parameters, including the financial health of the company. So valuation is an art, it is a science, and it is also a craft, which crafts out or weaves a story built around certain numbers with a view to presenting to an investor a credible investment idea. Let's go down to the basics and try and find out what is value, valuation. This word is derived from simple word value. So let's first try and understand what is value and how can we determine the same. Let us appreciate the difference between price, cost, and value. When you go to a market to buy any product, maybe a shirt, maybe a grocery, maybe vegetable, if the seller says he wants to sell a shirt for 2,000 rupees, do you straight away take out your wallet and pay 2,000 rupees for that? No. Most of the times we try to bargain. We try to bargain because any product that you buy that product for some kind of a utility that you want to derive from that product. And the price, therefore, that you would be willing to pay for a product has to be commensurate with the expected utility of the product. There has to be a commensurate parity, equality between the price that you pay for a product and the corresponding utility that you think you will get by purchasing that particular product. That's where the important element of price comes into play in the whole aspect of valuation. Second is cost. Whatever product you're going to buy, whatever service you're going to buy, it must have incurred certain cost in order to create that product or bring into existence that particular service. So the cost becomes a relevant factor to be considered in the case of valuation. And then value. Why should any product have a value? Because it provides some kind of a utility. It fulfills some of your human need. It satisfies some of your human wants and needs. That is the reason why a particular product or a service will have value. So let's first try to appreciate the three key terms or the difference between these terms, that is price, cost, and value. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. A very old quotation by Warren Buffett. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. When you go to a market to buy a shirt, you have an option of buying a branded shirt, which is very costly, but has a very good cloth, has a very nice design, latest fashion, has a very good stitching, yes, is going to last you for a number of years, yes, and as compared to a local shirt, which is cheaper, but the cloth is also not very fine. Designing, styling is not very contemporary, not very latest. And the stitching is also so. The quality of the stitching is also very poor. Now, how much price would you be willing to pay for a shirt? It depends upon what is your mindset in terms of what value you think you'll be able to derive from a product. Price is what you pay. Whatever you pay today for buying a shirt, that is the price from your side. But in turn, what you're getting is you're getting value. You're getting a different value from a branded shirt, and you will get a different value for an unbranded shirt or a local shirt. It all depends upon the mindset of the person concerned, which particular shirt he would like to buy at a given point of time. How the price of a product or service is determined? Price is where the deal is struck. When you go to a market and the seller says 100 rupees for a particular product, but you don't take out your wallet immediately and pay 100 rupees, you would always like to bargain. And you say, Baba, no, 100 is too much. I would be willing to pay just about 80 rupees for that. And then, of course, the negotiation starts, which determines the final price. If the seller is in a dominant position, you don't have much options available in the marketplace. Maybe that he'll be able to stick to his price of 100 rupees. You will have to pay 100 rupees. Without that, you can't buy that product. Or if the buyer is in a dominant position, he might be able to pull the seller down to at least 85 or 90 or 95, and that is the price at which the deal will be struck between the two parties. But in any kind of valuation, price is very, very important. Whether a product that you buy is going to be a good value for you or is not going to be of significant value, it depends upon how much price you have paid for acquiring that particular product or acquiring that particular asset. I would like to share here a real life example of Tata Chorus deal, which happened in 2007-2008. Tatas were scouting around Europe. They wanted to pick up a company, a steel manufacturing company in Europe, and they were toying with the idea, and they were scouting around for good enough 6 months, 9 months. Finally, they identified a target company, and that was Chorus Steel Incorporated of UK. Chorus Steel. You know, Tata Steel is a very big company of India, very big company. Huge turnover, huge capacity, huge number of people working in Tata Steel. But believe me, Chorus Steel at that point of time was 4 times bigger than that of Tata Steel. So this was in fact a kind of reverse merger. or reverse acquisition. Normally, a merger happens or an acquisition happens where a bigger company acquires a smaller company. But when it is the other way around, a smaller company acquires a bigger company or a larger company, it is technically identified as a reverse merger or reverse acquisition. This was a case of reverse acquisition. And this was supposed to be acquired, Corus Steel was supposed to be acquired by acquiring the entire share capital of Corus Steel Limited at a price of 4 pence per share. Pound, pence, 4 pence per share. And the deal was almost done. The negotiation had almost concluded. Suddenly, what happened? A Brazilian company jumped into the fray. That company offered higher price per share for acquiring Corus Steel. Tatas were already there. They also increased their bid price. Brazilian company increased their bid price. Finally, Tatas were able to close the deal by offering still higher price, which was almost about 30% higher than what they had originally bid for acquiring Corus Steel UK. They ended up paying 30% higher price than the original price that they had bid for acquiring Corus Steel. That's because of the competition triggered by the Brazilian company, which jumped into the fray when the Tatas were just about to close the deal and just about to close the negotiation. And we know now that ever since Tata acquired Corus Steel UK, the valuation of Tata Steel has never really looked up. It's not been a good deal. It has not provided the expected synergy to the Tata Group, which they were expected to get by acquiring of Corus Steel UK. The valuation of Tata Steel has not been looking up ever since they acquired Corus in 2007-2000. The reason is the price that Tatas ended up paying for acquiring Corus was more than the perceived expected value. Had they been able to pick up Corus at the original bid, initial bid which the Tatas had made, this would have been a good deal. This would have been a very, very beneficial deal. But they ended up paying 30% higher than their original bid. And that's where there was a mismatch between price and value. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And when there's a mismatch between the two, that's where the synergy is not there. That's where the benefits are not available. And that's where the whole ballgame of mergers and acquisition, it does not provide the expected benefits to the particular company. Therefore, it is very important to identify what is the optimum price, appropriate price to pay for acquiring a particular asset at a given point. And how price is determined? Price is determined by and through the process of negotiation. In the case of Tata Corus deal, negotiations were conducted by one Mr. M.R. Gandhi. He is the old stalwart of Tata Group, a well-known negotiator. It was not Mr. Ratan Tata. Of course, he was in touch with Mr. Ratan Tata all through, but the final negotiation, the front-end negotiations were carried out by Mr. Gandhi, who was sitting in London, and Mr. Ratan Tata was sitting in Tata House, Mumbai, when the deal was struck for acquiring Corus Steel UK. What is cost? Cost matters to the seller. As we all CMAs appreciate and understand, cost is directly related to consumption of resources to create an asset. In order to create an asset, there'll be various activities involved, and each activity is going to consume certain resources. And each one of the resources that goes into the element of creation of an asset or provision of a service has a cost attached to it. And that's where the cost becomes an important component of the whole valuation mechanics. Cost is directly related to consumption of resources. Because you want to create a new product, you will have to go through various activities, and each activity is going to consume certain resources, and each consumption of resources is in turn dependent upon and related to and associated with the cost factor. Some of the costs are direct costs, some of the costs are indirect costs. Of course, that division we know. Some of the costs are fixed costs, some of the costs are variable and semi-variable, but nonetheless, all these costs get accumulated or allocated and apportioned, and thus we are able to determine the final cost involved in creation of a product or service. Then comes value, price, cost, value. Jim Crocker says value is in the eyes of the beholder. Value is a relative term. Something which is of very high value for one person may not be of such a high value for another person, because it all depends upon the individual's need, the individual's expectations, the perceived benefits of an individual, and that is why the value of any product, it differs from person to person. Let me give you an example. There was an old person, about 70, 75, 80, and he was on the deathbed, very, very sick, and he was just about to die. He had his grown-up son standing beside him, and in those last moments of his life, he took out his wristwatch and gave it to his mature son and said, "My dear son, my time is limited now. My heartbeats are just about to end. This is a precious gift from my side. Anytime you find yourself in a bit of a problem, anytime in your life, this will help you out." And after having said so, and after having given that wristwatch to his son, the old man passed out. This young man was doing pretty well in his life. He never really thought that he would ever require that wristwatch to be taken out from the locker and to be able to bid for getting something in return for that, because he was doing pretty well in his life. But then in business, there is the business cycle. In business, there is a life cycle of companies. Similarly, in our individual lives, the life does not remain the same all the time. There are ups and there are downs. All of us have in our life good times and bad times. And it's a natural cycle. You don't really have any control over that. This mature son of that old person, after about 20, 25, 30 years, landed himself in some kind of a mess, landed himself in some kind of a problem, and he thought, let me take out the watch which my father had given to me. Let me see how this watch can help me out. He took out that wristwatch and he went to a watch repairing shop. And he asked the fellow sitting there, "I want to sell this watch. How much money would you give me for this?" And that fellow said, "Well, this is an old watch, no good, no use. I'll give you 500 rupees for that." This fellow was very disappointed. "My father told me this is going to help you in case of your tough times. But here, I'm just getting about 500 rupees for this watch." He met one of his friends who suggested, "Why don't you send this watch or check out by sending an email to the company in UK which manufactured this watch maybe about 80, 85, 100 years back." He wrote an email to the company along with the photograph of the wristwatch, and the company immediately replied after 2 days, "Well, even though this watch is of no use for us, we have discontinued this particular model, but nonetheless, because you have so carefully preserved this watch for a period of 100 years, we would be willing to pay you 5,000 rupees for the same." 5,000 rupees, that's it. This person was hugely disappointed. He met another friend of his, and his friend suggested, "There is a museum in the city. Why don't you take this watch to the museum curator and talk to the owner of the museum? maybe he'll be able to give you a good price for this wristwatch. Next day morning, he went to the museum and he showed the watch to the curator of the museum, and he was astonished to see that watch, very, very excited. And immediately he said, this watch will be a very good addition to the collection of antique items in my museum. I'm willing to pay 10 lakh rupees for this. The point is, value lies in the eyes of the beholder. Same watch, 500 rupees, 5,000 rupees to 10 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees. Same thing, but value lies in the eyes of the beholder, because valuation or value is a relative term. Something which is of huge significant value for one person may not be of high value for yet another person, because value differs from person to person, place to place, time to time. Value is in the eyes of the buyer. But still, we have not yet defined what exactly is meant by value. Value is a function of future benefits. When you buy a product, when you buy an asset today, what you are essentially looking at is what is the estimated future economic benefits, estimated potential future economic benefits that I can derive from this product in future. Suppose you pick up a Reliance share in the stock market today at a price of 2,200. Well, the price has jumped from about 1,400 to 2,200 over the period of last about 8 to 10 months. But that's of no use for you. You were not a party. You were not enjoying that party when the share price moved from 1,400 to 2,200 in the period of last about 8 to 10 months. You have picked up the share today, and you have picked up the share at a price of 2,200 in anticipation of future potential economic benefits that you can probably reap and that you can probably enjoy by virtue of your acquiring and holding out Reliance. Whatever has happened in the past is the past, but you are picking up an asset today in anticipation of earning future benefits, earning future economic benefits from that particular product, and that's where the importance of valuation actually lies. Yes, Mr. Saha, you have a question? Mr. Devashish Saha, you have a question, please? I'll take the question later, no issue at all. So, price, cost, and value. Cost is associated with consumption of resources. Price is determined by negotiation between the buyer and the seller. And the value is anticipated future potential economic benefits. Anticipated future potential economic benefits likely to be derived from a product or service is what is known as value. The challenge of valuation is challenge of integrating value, price, and cost. How do we integrate all these three components together? When somebody who is selling the asset, look at it from his perspective, he would obviously not be willing to sell the product at lower than the cost price. He will not be willing to sell at lower than the cost price. And therefore, cost becomes very, very important for him. But from the buyer's perspective, price is very important. How much you are paying for acquiring that asset. But price is what you pay, value is what you get. So price and value are correlated with one another. How much price a customer would be willing to pay for a product now depends upon what is his perception with regard to future economic benefits that he would get by acquiring that asset at a given price today. So the actual valuation of any product, maybe a business, maybe a company, it is integration of three factors together: price, cost, and value. But valuation is not only about numbers. It is not simple input output. A spreadsheet, data analytics, and you can input certain numbers and you can get the value out of that. GIGO, G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. It's not only about numbers. Valuation is all about the story behind those numbers, the reasons behind those numbers. And therefore, valuation to a lot of extent depends upon your judgment, your gut feeling, your hunch. Of course, numbers aren't the starting point. Trends have to be analyzed. Future cash flows have to be projected. Future estimates have to be made with regard to the business and economic scenario. But after having looked at those numbers, the final value is required to be crafted based upon judgment, based upon experience, based upon gut feeling, and based upon hunch of the valuation profession. Let's stick to that. Let's go down to very, very basics and try and understand, why does any asset have a value? Why does any asset have a value? Very, very basic question. An asset will have a value if it fulfills the following three essential characteristics. Anything will have value if that thing fulfills the following three essential characteristics. Number one, it must possess utility. What is utility? In microeconomics, we have the concept of marginal utility, equimarginal utility, diminishing marginal utility. Utility simply refers to the need satisfying power of any product, want satisfying power of any product. If a person is thirsty, he will have a glass of water. Water is useful. Water has utility because it quenches your thirst. If you want to write something on a paper, you need a pen. Pen has utility because you can write something on a piece of paper with the help of a pen. For any product to have any kind of a value, first important requirement is it must possess utility. A log of wood lying in the forest is useless. But when that log of wood is carried to the city, given to a carpenter who carves out a beautiful piece of furniture out of that, it gets utility. Very simple example. Similarly, sand lying on the sand shore or seashore, useless. But when that sand is carried to a city, used in the construction of a beautiful building, sand gets utility. Same sand, same log of wood, but simply by changing the place, bringing it from one place to another place, it is imbibed with utility. It then gets power to satisfy some of the needs and wants of the human beings. Therefore, anything to have value in this world, first important characteristic to satisfy or fulfill is that it must possess some kind of a utility. Second aspect is it must be scarce. Anything which is in oversupply probably doesn't have any value or has very minimal value. Scarcity is one of the important characteristics, one of the important elements of any product to possess a value. A Chinese company has hit upon a novel idea of filling up pure air, fresh air from the Alps mountain in Switzerland, and they are selling it in the market, filled up in canisters, like we sell water bottles in India. They are selling fresh air filled up in canisters. Well, all of us would say, why should somebody buy air? Air is available free of cost. It's a gift of nature to us. Yes, air is available all across the world on this planet. But what we are talking about and looking at is pure air, fresh air. Most of the parts of the world are polluted. They have polluted air. Degree may be less or more, but most of the parts on this planet, we have polluted air. So if somebody is selling a fresh air or a pure air, it definitely has a market because pure air and fresh air is scarce on this planet. So the second important element is that the product must be scarce or the service must be scarce. Third important characteristic for any asset to have a value is it must be marketable or transferable. If there is some kind of a restriction placed because of some kind of a court order or some kind of other limitation, that there is a product which cannot be transferred, which cannot be sold, which cannot be exchanged, which cannot be alienated, it would have no value because you can't enter into a transaction involving that particular product because of certain limitations. Therefore, any product to have a value, it must have ability of being marketed, ability of being transferable, exchangeable between the two parties. Only then the particular product will have value and not otherwise. So there are essentially three important characteristics which must be fulfilled before any product can be said to have any kind of value in itself. So what is valuation? Valuation is the process of determining the economic worth of an asset. Economic worth means future potential economic benefits, which can be expected to be derived from a product. But then we look at economic worth or a future potential economic benefits of an asset based upon certain assumptions, because nobody knows what is going to happen in future. So you have to arrive at the future estimation of economic benefits by looking at certain assumptions and limiting conditions and subject to availability of data as on a particular valuation date. Just as you have balance sheet, which is always prepared as on a particular date, as against the income statement, which is kind of a flow statement, which is prepared for all transactions which have taken place in the business of revenue and expenses over a period of last 12 months. But a balance sheet is a statement which is prepared as at 31st of March of every year. Similarly, valuation of an asset is to be carried out on a particular valuation date. Its value will be different on some other date. If you look at the valuations of any company today in say pre-COVID situation and carry out the valuation of same company now in post-COVID situation, there's going to be hell of a lot of difference between the two values, either on the downside or on the upside, depending upon which sector the company belongs to. Because of COVID-19 pandemic situation, some businesses have been hit very, very badly. Some businesses have benefited and some businesses have had a medium shock or a medium impact on their business model. So depending upon which particular sector the company belongs to, the valuation is going to be either uptick or downside, but it's definitely going to be hugely different from the valuation of the same company in the pre-COVID scenario. Valuation is the process of finding value of an asset or a liability or a business or an entity. Valuation is the process of estimating the potential worth of an asset or liability or a business enterprise, future potential economic benefits likely to be derived from a particular asset. That's what valuation is all about. So value is the monetary worth of future benefits one is going to have from an asset. But value depends on who is determining the value and for what purpose. If there is a joint Hindu undivided family and there is a division of family property, division of split of HUF, then the family property will have to be valued for checking out the share belonging to each one of the descendants. Similarly, if there is a partnership firm and a new partner joins or an existing partner is getting out, still the partnership property might have to be valued. Investors, they try to arrive at the value of a particular stock, value of a particular share. And if you're talking about an investor who is a private equity player, angel investor, then they are looking at making investment in companies. And therefore, they look at the value of the company. Sellers, obviously, they look at how much price they can fetch by selling a particular product in the market. Employees, some companies have the strategy and policy of giving out bonuses in the form of ESOPs, employee stock option plans, where instead of paying out cash bonus, the company might decide to offer certain number of shares free of cost to the employees, which you can encash at later point of time. When the company issues ESOP, this is a case of issue of shares for consideration other than cash, because cash is not going to come into the business. You are offering ESOP free of cost, but nonetheless, with a view to accounting for those shares in the books of accounts, and from taxation point of view, you have to tag a price to each share. You have to do the valuation of shares with a view to issuing shares as ESOP to the employees. And of course, the prospective buyer of any asset obviously would like to match price with value, because a buyer will pay the price and will get a value. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. He has to somehow try to arrive at a kind of a balance between the two, synchronization between the two, and therefore value depends upon who is determining the value, first point, and second, for what purpose. What is the purpose of carrying out value? Is it for mergers and acquisition? Is it for valuation of shares? Is it for finding out India's value of particular share? Is it for split of partnership? Is it at the time of split of HUF? What is the purpose and objective of valuation? And who is determining the value will actually determine the value of an asset. So value depends upon three factors. Who is doing valuation? And then second point, why valuation is being done? What is the purpose? What is the objective of carrying out valuation? And the third aspect, when one is doing valuation, that's the timing part of it. As I told you, gave you the example, the valuation of all the companies pre-COVID and post-COVID scenario is found to be hugely different, either on the upside or on the downside, depending upon which sector the company actually belongs to. But the valuations have gone up or gone down very, very significantly from pre-COVID to post-COVID scenario. So valuation depends upon who is doing valuation, for what purpose, at what time. What is the purpose, objective of valuation, and what is the time when the valuation is actually being done? That is the timing aspect. Now, value has different connotations which are used for different purposes. Value may be FMV, fair market value, fair value, intrinsic or fundamental value, investment value, synergistic value, special value. These are different connotations of value which are used for different purposes. What is the fair market value? It is an estimate of the market value of an asset based on what a knowledgeable, willing, and unpressured buyer would pay to a knowledgeable, willing, and unpressured seller in the market. 3 words: for exchange to happen, for one product to pass from one person to another person, there have to be at least 2 parties, and both the parties, the buyer and the seller, are expected to be knowledgeable, willing to enter into a transaction without any pressure, unpressure. This is like a situation of perfect competition that we study in microeconomics. A perfect competition is a market structure where there are a large number of buyers and sellers. There is a homogeneous product. There are no entry and exit restrictions. There are no taxes. There are no transportation costs. There are no commissions involved. And each person is fully knowledgeable about the market characteristics. So, if there are 2 parties, one party willing to sell a product, other party willing to buy a product, both the parties are fully knowledgeable with regard to the prevailing market conditions. They are both willing to enter into a transaction, and they are both unpressured, no pressure on either one of them. The price at which they will settle for a particular product is technically called a fair market value. This is also known as arm's length principle. That means the parties are not negotiating, not agreeing to sell or buy a particular product based upon some kind of peer relationship. There's no relationship. It's arm's length relationship, arm's length principle. And therefore, they try to arrive at fair market value by way of mutual negotiation between them so that neither of the party gains abnormally at the cost of the other. It's not win-lose. It is a win-win situation for both of them. Buyer is happy for whatever price he has paid for a product. Seller is happy for whatever price he got for selling that product. Both are happy. It's a win-win situation. It's not a win-lose situation. What is a fair value? A hypothetical value, the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement. It is based upon hypothetical transaction. The key elements of fair value are there has to be an exit price, the asset should be sold or liability should be transferred in an orderly transaction, and the transaction must be between the market participants. So, sale purchase of shares which happens in the stock market, BSE, NSE, is a fair value of shares because there are a large number of buyers and sellers, and these transactions take place in the real market space. There is an exit price, and the transaction happens in an orderly manner, and the transaction happens between the market participants. So that provides you the basis of a fair value of transaction between the 2 parties. Intrinsic value is the true value of a company or an asset based on an underlying perception about the future benefits from all aspects of the business, both tangible and intangible. Zomato. Even though financial situation of the company was very, very bad, but nonetheless, looking at the future prospects, looking at branding, looking at brand equity, looking at the innovative business model, when you look at intrinsic value of the company, it appears to be pretty good, pretty attractive from the investor's point of view. This is actually the true worth of an asset. So in order to calculate intrinsic value per share of a company, what we do is net assets divided by number of equity shares issued by the company gives you per share basis value, intrinsic value of the company. If, for example, intrinsic value per share is 16 rupees and the share is currently selling in the market, trading in the market at 22 rupees, we say the share is overpriced because its intrinsic worth is only 16, but because of speculation existing in the marketplace, it's floating in the market today at about 22. But vice versa, if the intrinsic value per share is 16 rupees, and if it is currently trading at 12 rupees, then we say it is underpriced. It is a good buy because intrinsic worth of the share is 16 rupees. Currently, it is floating in the market at 12 rupees, and therefore it is underpriced, and therefore it is a good buy at this point of time. That's what is meant by intrinsic value. Investment value is the value of a property to a particular investor, and therefore the value changes from investor to investor. Let me give you an example. Suppose the company purchased a piece of plot 3 years back because company wanted to expand its operations, expand its capacity, and they wanted to put up a new plant. But on account of COVID-19 pandemic situation now, the company feels that they will not be able to make the required investment in the new manufacturing facility. And the company is looking for selling this piece of plot. They don't want to keep this, they want to sell this piece of plot. A month back, someone came and met me and he offered me a price of 1 crore 80 lakhs for that. Last week, someone came and met me and he offered a price of 2 crores 20 lakhs for that. Yesterday, someone came and met me and he offered a price of 2.5 crores. 1.8 crore, 2.2 crore, 2.5 crore. I was astonished why somebody should offer me a price as high as 2.5 crores when the market normal rate is around 2 crores or so, or maybe 210 or 220. Why should somebody offer me a higher price of 2.5 crores? When I tried to dig into the matter, I found out that this person who offered to buy the piece of plot from me at a price of 2.5 crores is very much interested in buying my piece of plot because he already has an adjacent piece of plot. For him, it is a very, very good deal. If he buys my piece of plot also, his plot chunk will become a bigger chunk, and that will have a lot of advantage for him. That is investment price because it differs from person to person. One person was offering me 1.8 crores. Second person offered me 2.2 crores. Third person offered me 2.5 crores. The value changes from investor to investor, depending upon his or her expectations and requirements. Then you have synergistic value. Normally, this is useful and relevant in the context of mergers and acquisitions. When two companies decide to merge together, a company with a turnover of 100 crores decides to merge with another company of turnover of 50 crores, the expectation is that the turnover of combined entity after merger should be more than at least 150 crores. It should not be only 100 plus 50, 150. It should be more than 150 crores. Then only the merger deal is going to be actually beneficial. So people always look for synergy in mergers and acquisition deals. Synergic value means it's a marriage value. Definition of synergy, 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. That means when two assets are combined together to create a third asset or a new asset, that new asset must have value higher than the simple algebraic values of the two separate assets. If that is happening, then we say there is synergistic value accruing in this particular deal, which never really happened in the case of Tata Coral Steel 2007. That synergy could never really be developed One, because of the high price that the Tatas ended up paying for acquiring Chorus. And second, because the companies could not integrate culturally. UK workforce, UK work pattern, entirely different from that of India. The cultural integration, which is so very important for a company to become efficient and synergistically valuable, was not there in the case of Tata Chorus. Special value. Example, that same watch example which I had given you right now. One person was willing to offer him 500 rupees for that. Second person offered him 10,000 rupees for that. And the third person offered him 10 lakh rupees for that. Special value basis captures the set of characteristics that make the business or its assets valuable to a specific investor. Specific investor. 10,000, 10 lakhs, 500 rupees. So depending upon what is the requirement of a particular person, what value does he ascribe to a particular asset, the features of the particular asset, and therefore this is the value offered by a seller, which depends upon client and the customer. Liquidation value is the amount that would be realized when an asset or group of assets are sold without consideration of a going concern concept. Normal assumption that we have in accounting is if a business is established, it is likely to continue for an indefinite period of time. But in the liquidation perception, the concept and hypothesis is entirely different. That means we try to find out the value that if the business was to be sold, if all the assets of the company were to be sold today, how much value can the assets fetch? And there are two ways in which you can sell the assets of a company in winding up or liquidation. You can either go for slump sale, that is as a complete parcel, as is where is basis. All the assets of the company are sold out on one single day, one single transaction, or you can go for piecemeal sale. That means you try to wait for a better price and then you slowly, partially sell the assets over a period of time spread over maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year. Obviously, piecemeal sale will give you better value, but it all depends upon the requirements of the particular transaction, whether the company would use slump sale basis or would use a piecemeal basis for selling of its various assets. But the basic concept in liquidation value is we leave the hypothesis assumption of going concern. The company's business has come to a close. The company is getting liquidated. All the assets of the company are required to be sold out. And that's what, how much value can the business fetch in the marketplace? That's known as the liquidation value. Then you have replacement value. Suppose you are purchasing a ready-built house or a flat. One way of looking at how much you should be willing to pay for that particular plot or that particular flat is, if you were to construct similar kind of building all over again, how much would it cost you? This house is 5 years old. If you were to construct a building, or if you were to construct a house of similar construction, similar quality today, after first getting it demolished and then reconstructing everything all over again, right from the beginning, how much would it cost you? And that is what is known as replacement. You know, this is a very important decision that is normally required to be taken in the case of decisions concerning mergers and acquisitions. When a company wants to grow, there are two ways in which a company can grow: organic growth, inorganic growth. Organic growth is the company grows by itself. Inorganic growth is the company grows by acquiring companies from outside. In other words, there are two ways for a company to grow, either by going in for a greenfield project or going in for a brownfield project. A greenfield project is one where you buy a piece of plot in an industrial area, you construct a building, you install plant and machinery, and you start operating the plant all by yourself, a brand new plant. But then, even if you are looking at constructing a new plant or a manufacturing facility with an investment of something like 100 crores, is going to take you at least 18 to 20 months before your plant can go commercial and before your plant can start operating. But if you want to acquire a running company or if you want to acquire a running factory, the deal can be struck within 3-4 months' time. But at the same time, you will probably end up paying 175 crores. So there is a toss-up, there is a trade-off. 175 crores, you acquire a running company, that company becomes your company within 4 months, versus you spend 100 crores, but then that plant becomes operational only about 1.5 years later, 20 months later. So there is a trade-off. You got to decide what is the time value of money, how much advantage you will get by 16 months advantage that you are getting by mergers and acquisition, but at the same time, you are ending up paying 75 crores extra. So should you go for a brownfield project? Should you go for a greenfield project? It is a strategic decision that is required to be taken by the company concerned, where the concept of replacement value will become very, very critical. So standard of valuation. Out of various concepts of valuation, essentially, we look at 4 standards of value: fair market value, fair value, intrinsic or fundamental value, investment value. These are commonly identified as standards of value to be applied in different cases of your decision of acquiring a particular asset. Valuation is a matter of hope. It's all a matter of hope, nothing else. Because if you go back to the basic definition of value and valuation, potential future economic benefits likely to be derived from a product or from a business. Who knows what might be in store for any one of us in the future? Nobody can really predict future, and therefore there is always a whole lot of uncertainty associated with valuation, associated with business future. Therefore, valuation is all a matter of hope. You hope that things will work out like this, and on that basis, you try to work out the valuation of any asset or valuation of any business. The whole focus of business valuation is look for right numbers. That's what many people do. That's what most people do. But the numbers are never a whole story. Numbers are only a starting point. You have to create a story. You have to craft a story, weave a story around these numbers, a credible story, a realistic, believable story as to what the company is going to do in future. It is on that story that investors will decide to put their money into the company or not to put their money into the company. It's not only about numbers. Numbers are important. Numbers are only the starting point. But end of the day, you have to craft a story, you have to weave a story, and then only you can arrive at a good, realistic valuation. So what is the valuation process? Anytime you get an assignment to carry out a valuation, first of all, you got to understand the purpose of valuation. What is the purpose for which valuation is being carried out? Then you try to collect the relevant information from the company. The past financial records of the company, the budget of the company, the future estimates of the company, and things like that. Then you carry out financial analysis and make normalization adjustments. Adjustments for exceptional items, adjustments for non-recurring items, with a view to arriving at a normalized level of earnings of the company or a normalized level of turnover of the company, which is very common in financial management. Then you look at what are the different valuation approaches available to me for carrying out valuation in this particular case? What are the options available? Then you have to also go for forecasting and validating company performance going forward into future. This will initially be given to you by the management of the company because, of course, they understand their business the best. You are only an outsider. You are only a consultant, an expert in valuation. But people who have been running that business for maybe 20, 25 years, they know the real strength of the business going forward. But then again, you can't blindly rely on the forecasting numbers given to you by the management. You take that information with a pinch of salt. You carry out your own analysis. You decide upon and look at reliability of those numbers. Try to validate them by whatever way it is possible, and then use those numbers for projecting the future free cash flows of the company. And in doing that, you also got to understand industry characteristics and trends. Any company, it belongs to one particular industry. Say you talk about textile industry or you talk about steel industry, there are various companies operating within steel. Each company is ultimately part of the industry sector. And what are the trends prevailing in the industry definitely will have impact on performance of the company also going forward. After collecting all this information, then you finally calculate the valuation of a company and document that in the form of a valuation report and submit it to your client. That is how the valuation process runs from step 1 to step 7. You can also classify the entire valuation process into 3 stages: planning, inspection, reports. First, you got to plan the entire work of valuation. What is the purpose? Understand. What is the critical data which needs to be collected? How do I normalize different figures? Then you might have to go for physical site visit, inspection. You may have to carry out a market survey. That's also part of inspection. And then you have to prepare your report by actually applying the different tools and techniques of valuation, arrive at the valuation figure, and then try to figure it out and put it down in the form of a valuation report, which is then submitted to the client at a given point. What are the different valuation approaches or methods for determining the value of an asset or business or an entity? Primarily, there are 3 approaches: income approach, market approach, cost approach. Under the income-based approach, the methods that may be applied are DCF, discounted cash flow, or price earning capacity value, PECV method. Under the DCF approach, the future free cash flows of the business are discounted to the valuation date to arrive at present value of the cash flows of the business, or they are capitalized using a capital rate or a discount rate depending upon the capital structure of the company. So fairly simple. You look at how the income of the company is going to fan out in terms of free cash flows in the future, and then you convert those free cash flows projected into future into their present value equivalents by using a discount factor, which depends upon the capital structure of the company, because normally we apply WACC, that is weighted average cost of capital, as the discount factor. That's why the capital structure of the company becomes very relevant. What is the proportion of debt capital and equity capital? Is the company highly levered or unlevered? Is the company highly geared or low geared? That will change the discount factor to be applied, and that will change the very basis of arriving at a particular valuation number. Under the PECV method, that is price earning capacity value method, we look at what has been the average earnings of the company over the period of last about 5-7 years. Average earnings, average income. When we say normal average income, obviously you have to normalize income by taking and making due adjustment for non-recurring exceptional items. If a particular year was exceptionally good or exceptionally bad, those numbers have to be normalized. And then on that normalized number, we apply a certain multiple depending upon a similar company existing in the market, operating in the same line of business, moreover, what is the market cap of that company today? So if the earning of the company is 50 and the market share floating in the market today is 200, that means the company is enjoying a multiple of 4. It's not necessary that I will apply a multiple of 4 to value this company also. Maybe I'll apply 5, maybe I'll apply 3, maybe I'll apply 5.5. It all depends upon judgment, experience, hunch, gut feeling. But by looking at comparable company, how many multiples is it enjoying in the market in terms of its total average income, it does provide to me some kind of a rational basis with a view to applying a certain multiple for arriving at a particular value for a company. Market approach. Under this approach, the valuation is done on the basis of quoted market price of the company in case it is a publicly traded company or publicly traded comparable business. Data is reviewed in order to identify a peer group similar to the subject company, and then their multiples are applied to the entity being valued to determine the fair value. It is said that the market price of a company's share is very useful basis for looking at value, because how do we arrive at the market price of a share of a company? It is not based upon 5 people perception, not based upon perception of 100 people, but thousands, lakhs of people who are operating in the marketplace. And therefore, it is something like a collective wisdom of the market. It's a very useful basis. If you're comparing and looking at the market cap of companies which are publicly traded, that becomes a useful starting point for consideration of the valuation of a particular listed company. Asset-based approach or cost-based approach is where you look at either the book value or the replacement cost or the realizable value of the underlying asset. When you look at book value, you're looking at actually net assets value, intrinsic value. When you're looking at replacement value, that's basically replacement cost. When you're looking at realizable value, you're actually looking at liquidation value of a company. Depending upon what is the context, you can either apply net book value method or net replaceable cost method or net realizable value method. And this is what is falling in the third category known as the asset-based approach. So there are 3 approaches to valuation: income approach, market approach, asset-based approach. We can classify them in different categories: cost approaches, cost to build or cost to rebuild, reproduce, cost to replace. Market approaches where you look at comparable market price of public companies, or you look at similar transactions which might have taken place in the market, commonly known as precedent transactions, or you follow the DCF approach, in which case you will have to first predict and project the future cash inflows and then discount them using an appropriate discount rate in order to convert those future cash inflows into their present value equivalents. Impact of COVID on valuation methodology. COVID-19 has significantly affected economic activity and financial markets. For many assets and liabilities, fair values have changed significantly. Some of the company's value has gone up, some of the other company's value has gone down. Depending upon which sector the company falls in, the value might have gone up or gone down, but nonetheless, valuation of all the businesses has hugely changed on account of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic situation. So what do we do in such kind of a situation? How do we value a company which is facing onslaught or impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The guru of valuation, Ashwath Damodaran, says, don't abandon valuation fundamentals during COVID-19 crisis. Stick to the basics. It is precisely times like these that these matter most. You need to go back to the first principles of valuation. You need to go back to the basic principles of valuation. Don't play around with different techniques too much. In spite of there being a very significant impact of COVID, you got to stick to the basic principles of valuation. That is the advice given by the world-known renowned guru of valuation, Ashwath Damodaran. COVID-19 is changing how people define value in business. Valuers, valuation professionals need to construct plausible scenarios when forecasting business recovery from COVID. Some of the businesses have already recovered. Some of the businesses will take 6 months, 9 months more to recover. Some of the businesses might take 1 year, 1.5 years to recover. It all depends what kind of a business you are in, how much time will it take to recover from the slump into which it has fallen on account of COVID-19 pandemic situation. And therefore, while carrying out valuation of businesses, you must construct realistic scenarios. Valuation is not only about financials. Valuation is not only about numbers. You have to think in terms of triple bottom line, profit, people, planet, to which now the fourth P has been added, that is pandemic. You have to not only look at economic power of the business to generate profit, but also look at what kind of impact is the business having on the people on this planet. What kind of impact is the company having on the planet, environment, and how effectively, how resilient the company's business model is in times of COVID-19 pandemic situation. So the valuation is not only about numbers, it's not only about financial data, it must take into account 4 P's. First P, of course, is profit, very important. But at the same time, people, planet, pandemic, and profit. These are the 4 P's which must be taken into account with a view to arriving at a plausible valuation number. Further, valuation should consider 6 different types of capital. Normally, we consider only the financial capital that appears on the balance sheet of the company, but the concept of integrated reporting, which is fast catching up, which is changing dimensions of corporate reporting in the 21st century, talks about 6 different types of capital. Financial capital is just one of them. Human capital, social and relational capital, intellectual capital, manufactured capital, natural capital. There is an International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC, which talks about 6 different types of capital. So while valuing any company, while valuing the business of any company, you should actually look at these 6 different types of capital. Then only you can work out a true value of a company going forward. While carrying out valuation, you always have to make future projections, and future projections are always based upon certain assumptions. Hypothesis. Premises means hypothesis or assumptions. Here, boss is talking to an employee and he's telling him the premise was good. The hypothesis assumption was good, but you failed on the execution. So that's what happened. If your assumptions are not good, or if your assumptions are not realistic, your forecast of future free cash flows will be wrong, erroneous, and that will give you a wrong valuation for any particular business. You have to be very, very careful what kind of assumptions you're going to make, which set the tone for working out the free cash flows for the business, which become the basis for arriving at the valuation of any company. So what are premises? Premises are the basic or underlying assumptions about the present and future conditions related to an asset. These are assumptions regarding the most likely set of transactional circumstances that may be applicable to the business while valuing an asset. So when you're looking at forecasting into future, what kind of scenario you are expecting in the business environment going forward, that is what is meant by premise. So for the purpose of business valuation, we have two alternate following premises. For the purpose of business valuation, we have the following two premises. Either you look at the business as a going concern that it's likely to continue in future, or you look at liquidation. That means the company is likely to close down very soon and it is no longer likely to be able to sustain in the market as a going concern. So basically you have two basic assumptions. First assumption, that of going concern. Second assumption, liquidation. Depending upon what is the context, what is the purpose, what is the scope, what is the objective, you have to apply either one of these two assumptions. Either use the premise of going concern or use the premise of liquidation to be able to work out the value of a business at a given point of time. So what is the purpose of valuation? Valuation is required to be carried out in case of mergers and acquisition. Valuation is required for disinvestment, divestiture, just as Government of India has recently sold Air India to Tata's, and that's where the valuation was required to be done. And the valuation given for Air India was 12,000 crores. Tata's ended up paying 18,000 crores for acquiring Air India, but the basic valuation, the basic bid price which the government had kept was 12,000 crores. Valuation might also be required as per legal requirements. It is also required as part of accounting requirements, Ind AS, IFRS. It is required for investment purposes, and it is required for identifying undervaluation or overvaluation of various assets. This can also be classified into different categories. There are various transactions which require valuation to be carried out. Mergers and acquisitions, fundraising, sale of business, voluntary assessments of valuation. Under various laws, valuation is required to be carried out. Various regulations of RBI, income tax, SEBI, Companies Act, LODR, listing obligation and disclosure requirements of stock exchanges, insolvency and bankruptcy courts. From accounting perspective, there are various requirements of valuation to be carried out. When a company wants to issue ESOPs, purchase price allocations, impairments, Ind AS fair value. Under Companies Act 2013, there are various sections which require valuation to be carried out. 62, 192, 230, 236. There are various sections which require valuation to be carried out. Under SEBI regulations, valuation is required to be carried out under takeover, quote, under rights issue, direct acquisition, indirect acquisition, preferential allotment of shares, listing agreement, buyback of shares, section 74. Under RBI regulations, FEMA, inbound investments, outbound investments. When there is a foreign direct investment into India, valuation is required to be carried out. Similarly, an Indian company wanting to make investment outside, again, you require valuation to be carried out. Income tax rule 11UA, valuation of unquoted equity shares, and also for the purpose of determining arm's length transaction or transfer pricing, valuation is required to be carried out. So that's where we talk about emerging professional opportunities in the domain of valuation. Companies Act 2013 brought about a new feature, and it introduced the concept of a registered value. Till then, there was no qualification prescribed for carrying out valuation. Any kind of valuation could have been done by MBA Finance, by cost accountant, by chartered accountant, by anybody for that matter in the marketplace. But after 2013 Companies Act, section 247 says all valuation work required under Companies Act and Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code can only be performed by a registered value. And then lately, government came out with Valuation Rules 2017, which provided guidance who is the registered valuer, how a person can become a registered valuer. And the process specified therein is that we have three asset classes in the market today. A person can be a member of securities and financial assets class, or plant and machinery valuation, or land and building valuation. There are a few exceptions in the market where the same person is enrolled under more than one asset class. There is one member who is an engineer and also a cost accountant. He is registered as a valuer under securities and financial assets as well as under plant and machinery. But these are exceptions. Normally, a person belongs to one particular asset class. What is the requirement? A postgraduate with 3 years experience, a graduate or a CMA, CSCA with 3 years experience, or a graduate with 5 years experience is eligible for becoming a registered valuer. And for that purpose, you have to get yourself enrolled with a registered valuers organization, RVO. Our institute has set up a separate Section 8 company, of which I'm the managing director as of now, today. This company enrolls members as registered valuers, looks at their monitoring, looks at their grievance, looks at their discipline, looks at their professional development. That is the responsibility. And we report to IBBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, which in turn is supervised by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The procedure is, if you fulfill the eligibility criteria, then you have to get yourself enrolled with a registered valuers organization for undergoing a 50 hours mandatory educational course. There is a compulsory training, 50 hours, which is conducted by all the RVOs. There are total 16 RVOs in the marketplace as of today. Everybody conducts 50 hours training program. Normally it happens on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 hours each, and then next weekend again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But we also run it for 7 days at a flat. We do all kinds of programs, 7 days regular program as well as weekend mode program from time to time. After you go through this 50 hours mandatory training program, then you have to prepare yourself and appear for an objective type examination conducted by IBBI, which is separate for each asset class. In that examination, you will have 100 questions total. You will be allowed 2 hours, 120 minutes, and minimum pass marks are 60 marks. There is also a negative marking of 0.25%. For every 4 wrong answers, 1 mark will be deducted. There are certain specified centers. You have to identify a center in your city. You will have to go there, sit there, conduct, carry out and give the exam there, and result, of course, is given then and there. After 2 hours, immediately you click a button and the result will appear and flash on the screen. If you are able to clear the exam by scoring minimum 60 marks, then you get enrolled with RVO and also with IBBI, and you become a registered valuer. Then you can take up assignments for all valuations required to be carried out under Companies Act 2013 as well as under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Whereas so far as the current position is, any valuation required under SEBI, under FEMA, under Income Tax Act, under RBI regulations can still be carried out by anybody. The requirement of registered valuer is only for Companies Act valuation, company law valuation, and also for IBC as of today. Even though going forward, I think it's going to become mandatory for all valuations that nobody else will be able to carry out valuation, but only a person who is a qualified registered valuer will be allowed to carry valuation under various acts and laws. So this is a hugely growing space which offers good opportunities from professional perspective, and you can therefore conduct your required valuation work, and which is quite paying also. Just as we as members of CMA are governed by a code of conduct, similarly, all registered valuers also are governed by a code of conduct, which is mentioned in Schedule 1 of the Valuation Rules 2017. We need to ensure integrity and fairness. We have to always keep professional competence and due care. We have to be independent and we must disclose any conflict of interest. We must maintain confidentiality. We must take due care of information which comes into our hands by virtue of our being registered valuers. We should not give gifts. We should not receive gifts. Of course, we have a right to receive remuneration. At the same time, we should not get involved in any other function which is not allowed under the Valuation Rules 27. So the point is, friends, I've given you a broad overview of what valuation is all about, what is the concept, meaning, nature, approaches, methods of valuation, and also the scope. Valuation is required to be carried out for practically anything and everything in the marketplace today. Any startup going for any kind of funding, the person who is carrying out funding exercise, private equity, angel investor, would always like that startup to first be valued. And there is a huge opportunity available, but then that can be exploited only after you become a registered valuer. So this is the right time. All those members who have at least minimum 3 years of experience or 5 years after graduation, you are all eligible to apply for and become registered valuers and thus enjoy the benefits and fruits of the registered valuers profession, which is fast emerging and becoming very, very popular in today. Thank you very much. That's where I end my formal presentation. But any questions that any one of you might have, it will be my pleasure to respond to the questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now the house is open for question. You may write in chat box the question and sir will answer. Sir, one question was there.
Please.
If the trading value is more than intrinsic value, what is required to be done?
No, sir, you can't help it, sir. By comparing the two values, you only get to know whether the share price is overpriced or underpriced. If the intrinsic value is 15 rupees and trading price is 20 rupees, so we say the share price is overpriced because it is more than the intrinsic value and vice versa. So you can take your investment decisions based upon these two numbers. What is the intrinsic value of the company and what is the trading value? Based upon this, you can better take investment decisions from investor perspective.
Sir, next question, is the value of Zomato is justified?
Sir, it is justified by the collective wisdom of the stock market. I mean, there cannot be one person who is talking about it. People in the stock market, they're going crazy. 140, 150 is the floating price of the share today in the marketplace. If I say it's not justified, nobody will listen to me because there are people in the market who are selling at 145, buying at 145. There is huge interest in the marketplace. So obviously we have to accept that this price is fair price. This is the realistic price. The company is really worth that much value. You can't ignore that. It's a collective wisdom of the market.
Sir, next question. If someone has already completed 50 hours training, then how long he can appear in BBI exam?
Any number of times for any number of years. No restriction whatsoever.
Okay, sir.
Maybe after 5 years, if you want to go for the exam and clear it out, no issue at all. There is no bar, no time limit.
Next question, how valuation technique is used for investment in subsidiary? Please explain from the point of view of impairment of investment.
Yeah, when you're looking for making investment in a subsidiary, the company's law today allows only one layer of subsidiaries. Earlier, there used to be a situation where A is making investment in B, B makes investment in C, C makes investment in D, and there is a whole web of companies coming together under the cluster of that investment. But now we have provisions where only one layer of subsidiary companies are allowed. Normally, when you look at investment in subsidiary companies, because the subsidiary company may not be a listed company at a given point of time, you normally go on the basis of intrinsic shares. What is the intrinsic share value of the holding company share? So depending upon how much money you want to put into the subsidiary company, the total investment divided by the share price, intrinsic value of the shares of holding company, that will give you number of shares to be allotted in the subsidiary company for making investment on that. And it is, I think, right also, because both the companies are basically same management. One is going to be a holding company, another is going to be a subsidiary company. There should be no other basis, but the basis should only be intrinsic value of the share. Net assets divided by number of outstanding shares at any given point.
Thank you, sir. Now I hand it over to CMA Surjanarayan Tripathi sir for giving formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, namaskar, to all the participants who have extended again their support by joining this today webinar overview of valuation and emerging professional opportunities. Respected resource person of the occasion, CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta sir, all the past chairman of the chapter, ARC members and chairmen, CCM and RCM, managing committee members, guests, invitees, join in the today's webinar. I, CMA Surjanarayan Tripathi, Secretary of the chapter, feel honored to extend formal vote of thanks and pray before Lord Jagannath for all of your good health along with your near and dearer one. On behalf of the managing committee, I convey hearty thanks and unplumbed gratitude to CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta sir for the acceptance of our invitations delivered and interaction on the topic in detail. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
for
much.
your deliberation on what is when an asset has value, what is the value, what is its purpose, objective, what is reverse merger, acquisitions, who is doing valuation, why valuation, when one is doing valuation, what is the valuation process. All these will helpful to our participants to understand valuation and emerging professional opportunities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
My special thanks to our chairman CMA Himoj Mishra sir and CMA Shaktidhar Singh sir, chairman of PD committee, and all the managing committee members and staff of the chapter for their support to conduct this webinar. My sincere thanks to all the participants for their active support to make the webinar a success one again. We have same sort of support and cooperation in future event also.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. Namaskar, sir.
Good evening.